Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Jim Phillips. Jim is a life strategist, author, and speaker. For over 30 years, he has been inspiring others to higher levels of achievement and understanding through his strategy sessions, coaching, writing, and presentations. Jim believes that there is no right path or wrong path. There is your path. Follow it. Jim's newest book, now in its second edition, is The Key to Life, Living in Full Expression, Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World. Within the pages of The Key to Life, Jim shares how our insights and experiences offer an opportunity to gain clarity and answer questions concerning our soul, our purpose, and the active role we play as the creator of our own life. Jim Phillips, welcome to the Success Insight podcast.
Thank you so much, Howard. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, Jim, as I was preparing for the podcast, your publicist, Jonathan, just provided me a wealth of information, and including the copy of the book. So I want to thank you. And I have to admit, I was reminded some ways of being back in school with my yellow highlighter. I kept highlighting every paragraph, like, this is important, this is important. And I guess the bottom line is this book is so very important in the times we live in. And I know we're going to get into what is the key to life. But before we do, can you share a little bit about your background, and what is a life strategist, and how did you get to this point?
Sure. I want to make a point on what you just said, because it's kind of funny. You talked about you had a magic marker or a highlighter and go through the book. I wrote the book, and I do that because it does. It has a lot of information that I refer to all the time. And a lot of people have told me that it has become a reference book for them, which as an author, I really, really appreciate that. And I do find that the times we're in right now, it does provide insights that allows us, I think, to move through some of these really challenging things that are happening around the planet. Now, having said that, how did I get to where I am? It has been, I think, a very uneventful arrival, so to speak. There hasn't been anything extraordinary that I've gone through. So many people that do this sort of work or write books or coaches even, they've gone through some really terrible life tragedy, whether it's they've been addicted or an alcoholic, or they've had cancer, overcome that, or loss of family members. Whatever. And I've been very, very fortunate in that hasn't happened to me. And yet I've always had this very intense interest to figure out who we are when we look at humanity as a whole, why we're here, and then more specifically, what is my role in all that? So why am I here? What am I trying to do? What am I intended to do? And so when I got out of high school, I went to college, I studied business administration and marketing, which really has more to do with looking at success from a business perspective, and have had a very successful real estate career. I've had pretty much every role you can have in it. I owned my own company for 25 years. I've managed multi-office companies. I've been very successful with that. That actually opened the door for me to get into the coaching, because as you run a real estate company, and I actually still am doing that. I have 55 agents that work with me. I'm constantly coaching them. But my approach has always been more holistic. It hasn't been about just real estate. It's been about your life is your life, and real estate or your job is just one aspect of it. So getting into real estate opened me up to this whole world of coaching, but it also put me in front of a lot of people. So I became a speaker, and I created training programs and a lot of different things that would give me this opportunity where I could reach people, whether it was through a written word or through the spoken word. Now, the whole point of the spiritual side of all this for me, it actually started when I was 13 years old sitting in church. And it was one of those experiences. I guess you could say this was extraordinary, although to me it didn't feel extraordinary because it was my experience. But I'm sitting in church, and I was sitting between my mom and my dad. I was born and raised Christian. We're sitting in church. I do have siblings, but I don't remember why, but I was the only one there with my parents that day. And I remember looking towards the front. The minister was standing up there. He was finishing up the sermon. And I was feeling very uneasy. And my initial thought was, okay, it's just because I'm 13 years old. I'd rather be playing basketball or baseball or being anywhere but being in church. something really, really felt off for me, though. And it didn't feel like it had anything to do with religion or whether or not I believed or anything like that. So I remember just looking around and fidgeting, and I looked over to my left-hand side, and the people were there with the offering basket, and they were getting ready to pass it. And looked back up at the front, minister was still up there. And then all of a sudden, up to my right-hand side, and I jerked my head around when I heard it, was this voice that said, "You're going to be doing this someday." And then I looked at my parents. Neither one of them responded. They didn't react in any way whatsoever. They were still facing the front of the church. The minister was still up there. The folks that were going to hand out or pass the offering basket, they were still there. And I remember thinking, I'm going to do what? Because I was just sitting here fidgeting, thinking about how uncomfortable I was sitting in church. And I knew that I was not going to be a minister. I knew that that was about the furthest thing from anything that I would ever have wanted to do, was to be leading a congregation and being a minister. So I was sitting there, and it was a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, all of a sudden, the same voice, same spot said, "You're going to be doing it differently." Now I'm thinking, okay, so I'm going to be doing what differently? Of course, in that, I'm also thinking I must be going crazy, because there was no evidence of the voice coming from anywhere. So I remember hearing that you're going to be doing this differently. And I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be doing what differently? I'm not going to be standing up in front of a church. So that was when I was 13 years old, and I never told anybody about it. And in fact, my parents learned about it after I wrote my book. And to me, I've been questioned all the time, well, why didn't you say anything? Well, to me, it was personal. It was something that happened to me. I didn't know what it meant. So I didn't really know whether other people would laugh at me or say I was crazy, or that I just made it up, or whatever the case may be. And yet, as I was going through my life, I would find myself in situations where a couple things would happen. One, I'd be put in front of people where I have the opportunity to speak or to share some information that I had. But I also found that people could ask me questions about something they were going through, and I would be able to respond to it in a way that, to me, when I think back on it, I'm going to use the word wisdom, and I don't mean that to be superior to what anybody else has. It's just the word that comes up for me. That I had this sort of wisdom I could share with people that I felt was beyond my life experiences to that point.
When you heard the voice twice, was that instance, that day, that time, the only time you've heard those voices?
It's the only time that I heard that voice in that way.
Okay.
Now, what I do now is I take very early morning walks, and my guidance is given to me through that. So what I do is I go on these walks, and if I have a situation I'm working through, or I just want some information on something, or if I see something happening in the world that is upsetting to me, I'll ask questions about what the meaning is behind it, or what I can do about it, or what I'm intended to do about it. And I will usually get an immediate response. And it isn't a voice, but it's in a voice, and it's going to sound weird. It's a voice, but it's inside my mind. I mean, my brain. I mean, my mind, which I feel is external to the brain. And it is a voice, but it's my voice. And I questioned one time when I was talking to somebody who's been a great mentor to me. That's a very intelligent woman. She's been dealing in this sort of work for a really, really long time. And so she and I were talking about it one day, and I said, it's kind of weird to me that it's my voice. And she said, well, it's your voice because it's a voice you understand. It's a voice you recognize, and it's a voice you probably will trust. And I thought that made a whole lot of sense. Now, when I've shared that with people, they will say, well, that's just you telling yourself what to do. Well, I have thought that as well. But the fact of the matter is, the information that I get through that voice has never led me astray. So, we can call it whatever we want to call it. To me, it's divine information, divine wisdom, divine guidance, whatever label somebody wants to put on it. And quite frankly, I don't care if anybody else believes it. It's what I have experienced. It's what I experience on an ongoing basis. And it's what has worked for me and continues to work for me as I continue to live my life in full expression.
What I love about what you have shared, and just to provide us a little bit of a tangent, when I am asked to take on a responsibility, there are some instances of, you're a consummate businessman. You've been in sales. You're used to selling. I have found it for me to be uncomfortable. Not, I'm good about selling the podcast, selling the coaching. There are some aspects of selling that I find for me to be distasteful. And it's not my head talking to me or the voice in the head, but it's almost, to me, it's the voice in the stomach. For me, I feel the pain in the stomach. Like I don't want to do this, therefore, and I have found, and I think what point I'm getting at is wherever this voice for you came from, you have learned to recognize it and to stop in the moment and hear what it has to say, and then to act upon it. And I have also seen other people, I think when they struggle, is they haven't tuned into what their voice, wherever it's coming from, is telling them. But you've done that. You've been able to do that. And my sense is from the book is giving people the tools and the wherewithal to stop and listen to what their voice is telling them to do or not to do.
Right. We hear all the time, listen to the small, still voice. We hear all the time, get quiet so you can hear the small, still voice. You talked about it being in your gut. Well, that's also another way to describe intuition. And it is just that inner knowing of what we should do or shouldn't do. The challenge for most people is we don't trust it. We listen to the outside voices, being people that we know, people that are telling us what to do, how to do it, people who we have put trust in, that we're allowing them to say what's right or wrong for us. And it doesn't mean that they're not looking out for our best interests, but the inner voice, the intuition that we have, is never going to lead us astray. What we all need to do, and we all have it, so it's not like anybody is any better off than anybody else. Everybody has the ability and the opportunity to receive their inner guidance in whatever way works best for them. We have to be aware of it. And when we have that awareness, we then have to pay attention to it and then act on it. And the more that we act on it, the stronger that it gets. And the stronger that it gets, and the more we see the results that we're looking for as a result of following it, the more we're going to trust it. So it's one of them, we hear the thing all the time about it's like a muscle. And the more you use a muscle, the more it expands, the stronger you get. It really is that same sort of idea, that the more that you use your intuition, the more that you trust it, the more that you see the results you're going to get, the more you trust it, then the louder it's going to get. And then the better the guidance is going to be for you. It's also, though, about asking the right questions and asking for, it's not about asking for a new car. It doesn't work that way. It's about, in my opinion anyway, it's about asking for the things that are necessary or required for us to grow and expand spiritually, and to have the greater understanding of who we are and why we're here. That doesn't mean that won't include you getting a new car somewhere along the way. But to me, those are not the kinds of questions or guidance that we are asking. To me, it's really more about life and what's the purpose for all of us being here? How can I navigate life the best way and not only live life in the way that I was intended to live it, but in my living life in full expression, to use the title of the book. As I live my life in full expression, I serve as an example to other people of what's possible to them. And then my experience has been the more that I do that, the stronger that gets. And then the more influence that I have in a very positive way on other people, not because I'm exerting influence on them, but because they see who I am, what I do, how my life is unfolding. And often they say, I want some of that too.
There's this metaphor from the consulting world we used to use all the time and kind of do it still in coaching, is peeling back the onion. And I almost feel like who we are as individuals, doesn't matter what our profession is, we've spent our life through our own action, through the influence of our friends, family, parents, other, whoever is influencing us, to kind of build up the layers of the onion around us. And I almost feel like your book in this part of the full expression and is to teaching or coaching, helping, guiding, mentoring your client to peel back that onion to get to their, essence of who they really are or what they're capable of being.
Yeah, the way that I approach that, and I try to stay away from the cliches. They're so overused, and yet sometimes you have to go to that because it's the easiest way to get people to understand a particular idea or concept. But when I look at that whole idea of peeling back the onion, if we look at when we're born, we come into the world we're naked. We're here to learn, to grow, to gain as much as we possibly can during all the experiences we have during the life. So we start out fresh, brand new, scrub the whole bit. And what happens is we have untruths heaped upon us by other people. So we accept it. And so now we take that on. And then as we start to believe these untruths that people have heaped upon us, things like, you're not good enough to do this, or whatever limiting thoughts and beliefs that family members or friends or anybody might throw out there that we somehow take on as our own belief. So the more of that we have heaped on us, the deeper the essence of who we are is buried. So I look at this whole process of all of this misinformation, this untruth that's been heaped upon us. We have to shed it. So we're shedding the untruths so that we get and we reveal the truth, which is the essence of who we are. And so that's, to me, the process of life. It's once we become aware of the fact that there is more to life than what we've experienced, there's more to life and to me than what I have experienced and what I've allowed to be shared in the world, that I start to shed some of these untruths. And it comes about by asking yourself questions. And the very basic questions are, why do I believe what I believe? And that's a very interesting exercise to go through. And when I say that, it's about questioning when I speak about myself, when I question what I believe about everything. And it's what do I really believe about religion? Everything that I know about religion growing up, I was taught by my parents, and I was born into Christianity. So that meant that I was a Christian that was growing up. But what did that really mean to me in terms of my own thoughts and beliefs? Do I accept it? Or it doesn't matter, whatever religion somebody might be born into, that's the one that you are assuming as you're growing up. So I was just questioning it. What feels right, or what is true for me? And then really anything else about government, about relationships, about health, about science, about anything. And when I went through that process, what I realized was the vast majority of what I believed were not beliefs that I held because I had the experience of it, or that I really knew the truth, but it was because somebody else had said it, or I read it, or it was just, what appeared to be the truth. So it's easier just to accept it than to do the work to figure out if it really, really is true. And of course, what we see going on right now in the world is there is so much misinformation. And especially with the advent of the internet and now social media, information gets shared around the world in a nanosecond, and we're bombarded with it. And it becomes more and more difficult to discern the truth. And so that's a big part of this whole process too, is discerning the truth for each one of us to make sure that we're getting to our own truth. And as we get to our own truth, that is the path towards the truth, the ultimate truth, whatever that is.
How do we begin to go down this path of, shedding these untruths, the misinformation, and discovering our own truth? Because as you just rightly said, there's so much going on in this world between the social media and the vitriol and the hatred, for that matter, the conspiracy, and we're just constantly bombarded with it. And it almost feels like the message, which I believe that I get it. I believe that I want to learn more about it and to explore it. But I'm just me. How do I get 300 million other people to want to explore this too? How do we get started down that path?
Well, the first thing is we're not responsible for the other 300 million people. And I don't mean that to be flippant. I mean, that is the truth. I think we feel that we have this responsibility for some reason for everybody else. And our true responsibility lies towards ourselves. Once and that's key. You ask, how did we get started? It's about taking responsibility for our own lives, taking responsibility for our own thoughts, taking responsibility for our own beliefs, taking responsibility for our own choices, taking responsibility for our own actions. And that's a formula that is what results in the experiences we have. So it begins with a thought, then you have a belief, then you make a choice, then you take action on it. What we don't control is the outcome or the circumstances that would follow that. However, if we monitor our thoughts and our beliefs, and they are in alignment with the type of life that we want to live, if they're in alignment with who it is we want to be and how we want to experience and express in the world, and then we make choices based on that, knowing who it is we want to be and how we want to experience and express, and then we take action on that, well, then the likelihood is that the consequence of the action that we take is going to be more in alignment with the life that we want to live. And we're going to be more in alignment with who it is we desire to be and how we want to experience and express in the world. But it really boils down to people just taking responsibility. Now, here's one of my frustrations with all the information that's being put out into the world right now. So let's just use social media as the primary example. Somebody will post something, and I could find it offensive. I can find it ridiculous. I can find it to be just extraordinary. It can be something that's contrary to my belief. But quite frankly, I'm curious. I'm really curious because I know some really, really intelligent people who believe some things that I just find incredible, that I don't know how they believe it. So one question I ask myself is, what is it I'm missing that I don't get their point of view or their perspective? Because I really, really want to understand it, because my goal is to get to the truth. And for me to get to the truth, I have to ask questions. And I have to ask questions of myself, and I have to ask questions of other people. What frustrates me is when I ask somebody why they believe what they believe, and here they're posting all this stuff and talking about it and doing all this, they can't answer the question. They literally don't have an answer for why they believe it. Other than I have had people say, because it feels right. Okay, well, that's fine. That can be their intuition, or that could be whatever their guidance is saying that it feels right. But help me understand why it feels right, why you think it is correct. And I don't do it to upset people. But the unfortunate thing is, a lot of times when I really ask people questions, and I'm being truthful here, I ask them questions in a way that there isn't any reason for them to get defensive about it. I do it really out of curiosity, and I'm very careful with how I word things so that I don't cause somebody to feel defensive. But when they can't answer it, they get frustrated, and then they start calling me names, which I don't get, because that wasn't what it was about. It was about curiosity. And if we all really are interested in the truth, we have to have dialogue, and we have to be willing to hear the other side without pointing fingers and saying things about each other, or really creating this really intense negative energy that's not necessary. But it's got to begin with each person taking responsibility for their own lives and deciding that I'm not going to be the fuel for this negativity or this divisiveness or this hatred in the world. I want to be a catalyst of the positive aspects of it. I want to be one of the people who is always looking for the truth, and doing that by asking questions and being open, receptive, and honoring and respecting other people for who they are and what their opinions are. Doesn't mean we have to agree with each other, but we can at least have dialogue so that we're coming from this same place of really trying to get to the truth and understanding.
I struggle with the message you've just shared, and it's not because I disagree with it. I mean, I would love to feel that I can pose a question out of curiosity. Well, why do you feel the way you feel? Help me understand this. I can also see immediately the defensiveness occurring and the flippant responses, et cetera, and really it's taken a step back into some very ingrained beliefs. So I'm struggling with how this important message is. And again, I truly believe we've got to figure out a way to come out of this tailspin that we're in right now. And this work is wonderful to be able to do it. But how do we go in as one individual and develop a movement of followers who are also on a similar journey, and be able to go in being curious and make these changes when, it just seems like we're just going upstream here. And I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, the analogy that just came to my mind when you were saying that was, I had one of my clients was going through a very bad divorce. And she was constantly battling with her soon-to-be ex. And he would do stuff to her and she would do stuff to him, and they just constantly at each other. And it got to the point where they were just doing things to one another to antagonize each other. And so I finally said to her one day, I said, do you want this divorce to finally take place and for you all to be done with each other? And she said, yes. And I said, then why do you keep engaging and why do you keep antagonizing? I said, you're keeping this whole thing alive by what you're doing. So the analogy is, regardless of what side people are on, I hear people say, I'm just tired of this. I'm tired of all this stuff that's going on. Again, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Okay, if we're tired of it, then let's stop doing it. Let's stop throwing fuel on the fire that antagonizes the other side. Let's stop being drawn into the drama or the negative energy and everything else that's being created. Make a decision you're not going to engage with it. And it doesn't mean you don't participate in life. It doesn't mean you don't have your own beliefs, but we don't have to engage in that kind of, it's just the negative energy, the hate, the fear.
It's interesting. It just dawned on me that I can choose not to engage in this action, this dialogue. And by choosing not to engage, I am taking away the oxygen, so to speak, if this was a fire.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Right. Yeah. And that's what I meant by everybody's got to take responsibility for their own lives. And it is that simple. Now, no question, people are going to say things that really, really tick us off. I get drawn into situations because of what someone might say that I want to just rip them up. I mean, I really do. Regardless of how spiritual I want to say I am and how much I understand. I just want to get it out, get it off my chest, get it out there and just, let somebody have it. But then I also know that if I do that, number one, it's going to make me feel bad for a very long period of time because of the negative energy and just everything, the emotions and the stress and everything that I would go through by doing that. So it's not going to serve me. It doesn't serve the purpose of trying to make the world a better place by my engaging in it and just adding fuel to it, which is going to perhaps make the other side become even more angry or the other person more angry, which then just continues to perpetuate this. We have to be willing to step back and say, enough is enough. This isn't what we want. And then instead of fighting against this negative energy, well, what is it that we really want? And how do we get there? What steps can I take individually? Because I got to create my own world first. I've got to create the peace around me before I'm going to be able to create the peace that would go out from me out into the world. And it's not that I have to do anything specific. It's just that I have to be peaceful. I have to be calm. I have to be compassionate. I need to be respectful and honor other people for who they are and what they choose to do, regardless of what that is. And understand that their life is their life. And I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what they've gone through. I don't know why they believe what they believe. And it's not up to me to tell them differently. It's up to each one of us to discern the truth for ourselves. And we do that through the choices we make. And that whole formula, the choices, the beliefs, the thoughts, the choices, the actions that we take. And it's this, you're talking about the peeling back of the onion, or as I said, the unshedding or the shedding of the untruths. That's what that is. As we have those realizations, we let go of those things that no longer hold true for us, or that no longer are allowing us to get to where it is we want to go or to be who it is we want to be. Now, I have just two things I want to share real quick. When I was having some difficulty, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it's really applicable now. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was having some challenges with all the information. It wasn't anywhere near the information that's out there right now, but just a lot of information that I was getting and really, really wanting to discern the truth. So I was in a session with this person that I mentioned earlier that is a very huge mentor in my life, and we've done a lot of work together and that sort of thing. So we were talking about this whole idea of, well, how do I discern the truth? What's the best way to do that? So in this session, and she communicates with the other, with spirit and all that. So I don't want anybody or to feel that this is weird or anything like that. This is just what works for me. This is what came out of it. And so I asked the question about, well, how do I discern this? And two things came up. You ask yourself two questions before you do something that you're uncertain whether or not it is the correct thing to do. And the first question is, if I do this, will this end or lessen my suffering? Now, suffering isn't the suffering like you're in physical pain. This is suffering like stress. This is suffering like anguish. This is suffering like hatred. All the emotions that would take away from our ability to really engage in life in a very positive and energetic and loving and compassionate way. So if I do this, does this end suffering, not only for me, but for anybody else who might be the recipient of whatever it is that I'm going to do? Does it end suffering? And then the second question is, and you want the answer to both of these to be yes. And then the next question is, does this take me further along my life's path? And when I look at those two questions and I answer them, and I can answer both of them yes, then I know the steps I'm about to take, or that what I'm about to say, or who I'm about to be, or how I'm experiencing and expressing in this world. I know that it's going to be the truth. Because if I can end suffering for myself and other people, and if I can know that I'm always on my path, that is the appropriate path for me to be taken to get to the truth, then I know that I've made the right decision. Now, I'll also say in the heat of the moment, it's not that easy to stop and say, whoa, wait a minute. Is this going to end suffering? Is this going to, but as I would utilize this, it becomes more second nature. So I don't have to think about the actual questions. I just know intuitively that, no, this isn't going to help me. This isn't going to help anybody else. And this is certainly not where I want to end up.
Wonderful. I'm curious, you alluded to it a few moments ago, the types of clients that you work with, what types of challenges are they facing? Because I think anyone will benefit from reading this book, looking at these pages almost as a reference. I mean, use the term reference guide. I can't remember if it was during the early stages of the podcast or maybe as you and I were chatting beforehand. Who are the people that are ripe for this type of message and open to beginning that process of shedding those beliefs that are getting in their way?
Oh, well, I think the book is good for anybody who, this is going to sound like I'm just trying to make it all encompassing. I think it's good for anybody who is ready to start the process of taking responsibility for their lives. And it typically comes as a result of people getting to a point in life where really, regardless of how much material success they might have had, or regardless of what experiences they might have had, or regardless of how great their relationships might have been, people get to a point they say, there's got to be more than this. This can't be why we're here. And I think that's also when we tend to look at the world at large as well, because we see all this stuff happening around the world and we say, we can't be here to destroy each other. This really cannot be the purpose for us being here. There's got to be something more to this. So I work with people who get to that realization, and they want to figure out what it is they can do from that moment forward. And I say that moment forward intentionally, because what I don't want people to do is think that their life has been a waste up to this moment. It hasn't been. Their life has been what their life has been based on their thoughts, beliefs, choices, and actions, and then the consequences of that, all of which help them gain a greater understanding and experience of who they are, which is one of the primary purposes for us being here. And so we can't negate that and say that my life has been a waste. However, we can say there's a lot more that I can do. Here I am right now. And there's a term that I like to use that was given to me, or I heard from a gentleman that was given a presentation once. And the term is understand your reality. So if we sit here in this moment, which is the only time that we have, I mean, literally, it is the only time we have. There's not yesterday, there isn't tomorrow. This is this moment. This is the only time that anything can be done about anything. So the question is, understand your reality. So where am I right now? What am I doing right now? What is my life experience right now? Is it what I want it to be? Am I who I want to be, or who I believe I am intended to be? And if not, what can I do? What can I do in this moment, every subsequent moment, to make sure that I'm constantly moving in the direction of, or creating the opportunities for me to better understand who I am and what I'm here to do, and then to do those things. And this whole process then is about identifying I guess the three things that I use define, embrace, and experience. So define who it is that you are, define who it is you want to be, or who it is you believe you are intended to be. Embrace whoever that is, because we go through life thinking that we're this physical body, when in truth, we're not the physical body. The physical body is the vehicle through which the essence of who we truly are is experiencing and expressing life in physical form. We come to terms with who we are, not the physical body, but we're this entity that's within the physical body, experiencing and expressing. So how do I want to experience life? What can I possibly create? What can I do? We have to embrace that. And that's where we have been shedding a lot of the limiting beliefs that we hold that says we can't do certain things. Now, I'm going to jump ahead for a second. I'm going to say that we have all heard at some point in time that we're never given anything that we can't do, or we're never given anything that we can't handle. And while I agree with that, I take it what I believe is just one step further. And I don't believe that we are never given anything that we can't handle. I believe there is nothing we can't handle. I don't believe there's anything we can't handle. I don't believe there's anything that we cannot do. And to me, to have that belief, when I'm presented with what might appear to be a challenge, I look at it as a challenging opportunity, but I also look at it, okay, this is a way for me to experience and express myself and to really play with the limitlessness of my personal power. For me to be able to experience how I can overcome this particular situation and not allowing any limiting thoughts or beliefs that I might have held in the past to hold me back. It's about, okay, well, what can I do right now? And we're not going to always have the answer in the moment, but we're going to have something that we can do that starts that process. We start opening up to us. We take that step and all of a sudden something else shows up. Then you take that step, or you get a resource here and you get a resource there. And all of a sudden you realize that you have all of this information, you have all of these resources around you that I believe have always been there, but to which we've been blind to because of our limiting beliefs and thoughts and everything else that we get embroiled in during our lifetimes. But now when we get to that point where we say there's got to be something different, we're more open and receptive to it. We become more aware. And when you're aware, you see everything that's always been around you. And it's not just what's around you. We're looking at and feeling, what is it within me that is wanting to be expressed, that is telling me this is the direction that I need to go, or these are the things that I need to do, or these are the best thoughts that I can have. So as you go through that second step of embracing all of that, well, then the third part of it is you experience it. Because once you've embraced it and you've identified now as that, your true essence, and you've seen the limitlessness of your power, then you go out and experience. You do whatever you want. You play with it. You create. You enjoy. And it's not to impress anybody, and it's not to impress yourself. It's just because that's what we're here to do.
I love the fact that once you experience it, it's not just a one-off experience, but you are sort of building that muscle that now I can experience more. If our listeners would like to learn more and perhaps to begin the process, the stage, take that first step, that first drop in the proverbial ocean, so to speak, where are the best places for them to go to do that and learn more about you and your work, Jim?
Well, they can go to my website, which is livinginfullexpression.com. They can also buy my book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and places like that. So if they want to get a copy of that, they can find me on all of the social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So all of those are available. If they want to email me directly, they can email me at jim@livinginfullexpression.com. And I answer personally all the emails that come to me. So it's not going to be somebody doing something on my behalf. They will hear from me.
Sounds good. And we'll most definitely put the links back to the livinginfullexpression.com website and the book pages, at least on Amazon and and then your social sites as well. Jim, it has been a true pleasure to have you, on the podcast and chat about your life's work and where it is taking you. But before we go, you've shared a lot. There's a lot of wisdom here and insights. In the moment, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? We often have this piece called Insights to Go. So you've given us a lot of insights, but anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I'm going to repeat a quote that you said at the beginning here. And I think this will sum up really what we've been talking about. And the quote is, there is no right path. There is no wrong path. There is your path. Follow it. And that really is about being authentic. That really is about being your true self and living your life the way that you feel your life was intended to be lived, and for you being who it is you believe you're intended to be. We all too often get caught up in trying to be like somebody else, doing what somebody else is doing, and we're going to have a different experience of it because we're not that same person. And I also think we measure ourselves against other people. So if somebody else has made a certain amount of money, we feel we have to make the same amount of money or more to be considered by other people, but also by ourselves to be successful. We have to have a big car or a big house or any of that. That's not what life is about. Life is about each one of us, again, taking responsibility for our own lives and recognizing that my path is totally different from yours. And my path is my path. It's nobody else's. It's nobody else's business. And that is the path that I am intended to take. And it's the one that I'm taking. There are 7.5 billion paths on this planet that are being followed at this time. Everyone is a unique entity that is following their path. And I think if we allow ourselves, give ourselves permission to follow our path as we see fit to follow our path, not based on what other people are saying or doing or what they think is right for us, but really tapping into our innate knowing of what it is that we are to do and who it is that we truly are. Life is going to be a greater experience. It's going to be more joyful. It's going to be happier. It's going to be more fulfilling.
Well, and most definitely we need more of that in our lives. And each of us should want that for ourselves. And appreciate that. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Success Insight podcast. And we appreciate you taking time out of your no doubt busy day to join us today.
Thank you, Howard. It's been my pleasure. I hope the listeners enjoy the conversation that we had. And, if they have any questions, they can reach out.
Oh, most definitely. And I know they will. All right, folks, we have just been listening or chatting with Jim Phillips. He is a life strategist, author, and speaker. And again, for over 30 years, he's been inspiring others to higher levels of achievement and understanding, and really just helping them, as he had just said, to remember there's no right path or wrong path. There is your path and to follow it. So this is about discovering who you are and really just going down a path of creating the life that is full of full expression and life insight and growth for yourself. And really hope you enjoyed today's podcast and the messages that were shared by Jim. If you would like to learn more about Jim and his work, please do visit livinginfullexpression.com. And we'll also provide links back to the social sites of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, we'll have links to the book pages where you can find The Key to Life, Living in Full Expression, Ancient Wisdom for a Modern World. Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Do visit us on successinsightpodcast.com. Our podcast channels are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. And you can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, as well as YouTube at successinsightpodcast.com. So there we are. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and the rest of your family. Wear a mask, practice social distancing, and really be good to yourself. Start with just being good to yourself and making a difference for yourself, okay? And we'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.